Hello everybody, this is Johns Hopkins with Baltimore Heritage, and we're back with another of our 5-Minute Histories videos. And today I'm going to talk about Old Oriole Park here at 30th and Barclay, or at least the plaque that is behind me and the little bit that's left of it. Have to start by saying thanks to a gentleman, David Stinson, who has done an enormous amount of research on Baltimore's baseball history. So thank you, David. And in fact, was one of the people responsible for getting this plaque put up. For those of you who have tuned in before, you might recognize that I'm wearing my red Gunther Brewery baseball hat. You can take a look there. And that means we're going to talk about beer. And I cannot think of a better way to start talking about baseball history in Baltimore than talking about beer history in Baltimore. And that makes sense, at least for two reasons. One is I am standing in the courtyard of the Peabody Heights Brewery. I can smell beer being brewed right now, so that makes sense. The other is beer and baseball are intertwined back to the earliest days, back to the 1890s, a full 60 years before we pulled the St. Louis Browns out of St. Louis and made them the Baltimore Orioles. But back in the 1890s, the owner of the then Orioles team was a gentleman named Harry Vanderhorst. And he was the son of John Vanderhorst, who owned the Vanderhorst Brewery. Harry in 1892 took his team into the National League, and in 1894 they won the national championship. That was our first national title. And Harry had been serving Vanderhorst beer at his ballpark, the Union Ballpark, and that was pretty neat, but not special. Other ballparks did that. But Harry went big. He decided he didn't want just concession stands. He wanted a whole beer garden in his ballpark, and at Union Park he created one. Now today you can go to any number of the new stadiums and find a beer garden somewhere in the outfield somewhere. But all of those trace back to here in Baltimore, combining the German beer garden tradition with Baltimore's baseball tradition. All right, well, let's jump to Oriole Park here. And I have learned in preparing for this video that baseball history is as maddening as understanding baseball itself. It is an insider's game and it is a numbers game. One of the maddening things on the history side is that this Oriole Park, which was built in 1914, is not the first Oriole Park in Baltimore. It's not the second Oriole Park or the third or the fourth. It is the fifth park named Oriole Park in Baltimore. To make matters more confusing, they were all within a couple blocks of each other. So a crazy jumble of Oriole Parks for sure. The first Oriole Park was built in 1883, I believe. Yep, 1883. And it was in Waverly. For those of you who do not know baseball history, but know a little bit of Baltimore history, Waverly wasn't annexed into Baltimore City until 1888. So our first Orioles Park, first place that we played baseball, was actually in Baltimore County. Ballparks number 2 and number 3 lasted only about 10 years total. I think one only lasted 2 years. Today's owners that are always looking for the next greatest ballpark, a new ballpark with more box seats or sky boxes or whatever, maybe that actually has some deep roots, at least here in Baltimore. But parks 2 and 3 lasted only about 10 years. Park number 4 lasted a little bit longer, about 12 years, and it was interesting for at least 2 reasons. One is that the Baltimore Orioles, we had another team called the Orioles, they were one of the founding teams in the new American League. That's pretty neat. A few years later, however, they were moved to New York and became the New York Highlanders, which a few years later changed its name to the Yankees. So the hated New York Yankees have their origins here at Oriole Park in Baltimore. The second interesting thing that happened in that era was Babe Ruth, a gentleman named Babe Ruth. Many of us know he got his baseball start here in Baltimore, but specifically he got it at Oriole Park number 4. He was in the minor leagues then, part of, I think, the International League. And incidentally, the International League truly was international. It had teams in Canada and Cuba, for example. But Babe Ruth soon was traded to the Boston, I believe, and then eventually to the Yankees. So if you want to ponder the Yankees and their roots, they all go back here to Oriole Park in Baltimore. So now on to our park, park number 5, built in 1914. It was also called Terrapin Park because that's the team that played here, the Baltimore Terrapins. And that was good because across the road, literally across the street, Oriole Park number 4 was still standing and still had baseball being played in it. So for a short time, we had 2 parks across the street with 2 baseball teams playing at the same time. Luckily for the sanity of Baltimore baseball fans back then, the Orioles left mid-season, I believe in 1914 or 1915, leaving just the Terrapins. And unfortunately, the Terrapins League, the Federal League, folded shortly after that. But undaunted, the Orioles were revived in 1916 and had a good run here at Oriole Park until 1944. And that's when somebody probably flicked a cigarette and burned the park to the ground. It was made of wood, and it burned the bleachers and the dugouts. It burned all of the uniforms and the bats and the baseballs, the trophies that had been racked up here. It burned everything. But undaunted, the Orioles then just moved up the street to a place called Municipal Stadium that was a football stadium at the time, and they drew huge crowds. The stadium was bigger, and they got the attention of the owners of baseball teams across the country and City Hall. In the 1950s, City Hall tore down Municipal Stadium and built Memorial Stadium as both a football and a baseball stadium. In 1953, we got the Colts, and in 1954, we lured the St. Louis Browns away and turned them into the Baltimore Orioles, which is it's where our Orioles today got their start. Of course, in 1992, the Orioles moved to the new Camden Yards downtown, and Memorial Stadium sadly was demolished. But I want to leave with two thoughts about Oriole Park here. One is that sadly we cannot, if you're a baseball fan, we can't come here to see a baseball game played in an old school Federal League baseball park, but you can do that somewhere else, and that somewhere else is Wrigley Field in Chicago. It was also built in 1914, but it was built with steel instead of wood bleachers, and it survived. The second thought I want to leave you with is there was another team that played here in addition to the Terrapins and the Orioles, and that was the Baltimore Elites. They were part of the Negro League, and they played here from 1939 to 1944 when the stadium burned. It's spelled elite like we would spell elite, but if it was 1940 and you were in Baltimore, you did not say elite. You said the Elites. And they had a number of star players, including a gentleman named Roy Campanella. Campanella played here until 1946 when he was recruited by the Brooklyn Dodgers into their farm team. They had recruited at least two young baseball players, black baseball players, with the intention of breaking the color barrier in the major leagues. So Campanella goes down to Florida to train with the farm team. He is in fact not the first black person to play baseball in the major leagues. That was the other gentleman that the Dodgers recruited, Jackie Robinson. But Campanella was down there, and Jackie Robinson started in 1947, Campanella in 1948. He went on into the Hall of Fame as one of the best catchers to ever play. So I invite you to come down here. There is no better place to think about Baltimore baseball history than having a beer here at Peabody Heights Brewery in their beer garden, but also to think about not just how Baltimore shaped baseball history, but how we shaped national history as well. Thanks so much, and we'll see you soon.